Hey! I have to do a little peekaboo there with you. I scared you, I guess. But it's good to see y'all. Y'all are, I come think I can't see y'all. But y'all can see me. I guess that's all that matters. But, hey, before we get this thing started, I'm going to give y'all a special treat. Now, you can't tell nobody. You can't give this away because my identity will be revealed to the world. But since y'all are my biggest fans, I am going to let y'all see what I look like behind this mask. Okay, here we go. All right, get ready. Are you ready? Here we go. Now you kind of see why I'm wearing the mask, don't you? It's just, well, it ain't pretty. I know that, so I have to wear that mask where I can be a good-looking son of a gun. And anyway, I'm gonna put it back on. There's just so much of this anybody can stand. You know what I mean? All right. Now we're back to business. Well, now, hey everybody, we gonna do another video today, and today I told you here, and Brother Jerry told you that we got a bunch of other stories about his grandpa's rifle. Well, I'm gonna pick it up here. Yep, there it is again. This is the star of the show, and today's story it takes up about 10 years from the last story when Paul got the gun. He called it the John Bell Williams rifle. And you sit, if you watch that video, you realize how it got its name with the election of the governor of the state there of Mississippi that year. But anyway, today we're going to talk about something that happened in 1977, 10 years later from when he got it in 67, of course. But Paul, he run, and like I said, I'm going to call him Paul because he's a Paul to me too. That's the way I felt about it. But anyhow, Paul run this shop down there in the country, in the community where Brother Jerry grew up, and it wasn't far from the old house he lived in, and it was kind of the social gathering for the older men of the community, like I said the last time. But Paul's down there, and this was in, I believe, January of 1977, and the deer season was about to come to an end, and Paul had shot a little old buck about a month before that, sometime in either November or December, and he lost it and found it later, and it was decayed. It was just a little buck, about 3 or 4 point. Up until this period of time hunting with it, well, back in them days, there just wasn't a whole lot of deer around to hunt in the first place, let alone bigger deer of any kind. So anyway, that's the only luck he had had. And I think Brother Jerry had killed a couple or so, and his daddy had killed 2 or 3, and Paul had shot that one, but he didn't recover it. But season was about to be up, and one day, one of his neighbors, one of the other elderly gentlemen in the community, he came by the shop. His name was Mr. Clarence. Now, Mr. Clarence came in Paul's shop, and he said, "Herman," he said, "you need to just take off the rest of the evening, and we need to go a deer hunting." And Paul said, "Look, I got work to do. I can't be going no deer hunting right now. I got to finish this job and get it out." And Mr. Clarence said, "Oh, come on, you can take a little time off just for a few hours," and said, "We'll just go make a little drive down through one of them big old hollers down there across from my house and see if we can't jump something up." And Paul was reluctant. He didn't want to do it. He felt like he needed to get his work done, but Mr. Clarence just kept on and kept on. And finally he said, listen, Herman, he said, you need to put all this down and come go with me. Let's go show these boys what two old men can do. Well, Paul said, well, all right, I reckon so. So he went and he got his gun and his overalls on and his orange cap and went over to Mr. Clarence's and there was some big old steep hollers across the road and down behind the wood line there across from Mr. Clarence's and he put Paul down at one end of these big long running hollers, and Paul went down the edge of this field and the edge of the tree line, walked way down this big old deep holler down in the bottom of it, and got across on the other side and stood there with his rifle. Mr. Clarence went all the way down the other end of the long, big long holler. I don't rightly know how long it was, but I'd guess a couple 100 yards at least. And he decided he was just going to make a drive, try to jump one, run it back toward the fall. And if he jumped it up and got a shot at it, he'd shoot at it. But if not, he'd try to run it down there toward him. Well, Paul was down there waiting. He said, give me some amount of time to get on down there at the other end and to come walking to you. Just be watching good. And Paul said he would. So Paul stood there with his rifle in his hand. And he, first of all, it was in the thick woods. And when Paul hunted in the thick woods where a deer might be running, he knew he couldn't find it too good through his scope. So he did like I showed you. He folded that scope over on the side so he could use his iron sights. So he flipped that scope over on the side like that right there. And he was standing there just waiting and seeing if anything was going to come his way. Well, here in a minute, he heard the leaves run, something was running, coming along. And it was more than one deer. And it was two bucks. And the one in front was a little old 3 or 4 point like he had shot and lost before. But he got a glimpse behind it. It had a little bit bigger horns. And then over there, in them days, it looked like a big buck. Nowadays, you kill a lot bigger deer than that. But that was a trophy. And man, he got all excited and just in a tizzy, but he got ready. And that little buck run down in front of him and started to turn and go up the hill there and across the holler in front of him, and he let it go. And that old big one started running down, and it turned to follow right where that other one went. And Paul said, oh, no, you don't. He raised up, pow, shot him running, and the only shot he had when he was going up that hill, he was turned away from him. He shot him, hit him right in the back end, in the hindquarters, and he broke him down on his backside. And that deer hit the ground on his back, and it raised up on his front legs, was trying to get back up. Paul's afraid he was going to get up, so he reached over and he flipped that scope back up. He raised it up, looked through the scope, and he put it right in the ear of that deer, and he pulled the trigger, and it hit the ground. And Paul went over there, and oh my goodness, he was tickled to death. That deer was big-bodied, huge-bodied deer. And for back then, in those days, the deer that had it had a decent rack on it. It was a 7 point. And, he was a happy fellow. Well, Mr. Clarence finally worked his way on up there and saw what he had done. And, man, he was tickled too. But then Paul and Mr. Clarence said, now, this is a steep holler down in here. How in the world are we going to get this thing out of here? He said, let's just go out and get them boys, come drag it out for us. And Mr. Clarence said, nope, no, sir. We ain't doing it. Like I said, we're going to show these boys what these two old men can do. We're going to get this thing out of here ourselves. He said, you just get up there, and you get on one side of that deer on his horn, and I'll get on the other side, and we're going to drag it up that hill. Pop said, Clarence, I don't think we can do that. He said, oh, yes, we can, and we're going to do it. So wasn't no telling him no different. And they started a dragging. They'd drag it just a few feet at a time, and they'd have to stop and rest, just hassling for breath. Dragged a little bit more. Mr. Clarence turned over and laid on his back, reached in Bubba's jacket pocket or Bubba's overall or whatever he had, and he pulled out a little old box, and he had some nitroglycerin tablets because he had a heart condition. and he'd pop a pill under his tongue. He'd sit there and get kind of steadied out a little bit, and he said, "Okay, let's go." Paul said he'd drag a little bit more. And they'd have to stop and rest. Mr. Clarence pop another pill under his tongue. Well, anyway, they did that. Finally, they got it all the way up there out of the woods on the edge of the field that you walk down that. And they stopped there and rested a while. And Mr. Clarence said, "Well, I'm going to go get the tractor, and we'll drive it the rest of the way." So Mr. Clarence got rested up enough to where he could go get his tractor, and he come back out there, and they like to never got the thing over in the back of that tractor where they hook up the implements and stuff for it, but they just draped it across that and drove it to the house, and then got some of the boys to help them put it up on the hood of or the trunk rather of Paul's old silver gray Buick. I believe it was a 66 Buick, or maybe it was 64 or something. But anyhow, that old deer just hung off the side. A big old long deer, heavy, and Paul tickled. And he drove back to the house. And when Brother Jerry's daddy seen Paul with that big old deer, it tickled him to death. And he walked up to Paul, and Brother Jerry's daddy was a pretty stout fella, and he drove back and busted Paul in the shoulder just hardly. And Paul said he like to broke my shoulder, hit me with it, his fist like that. But anyhow, Paul was a happy feller, and him and Mr. Clarence showed them boys what two old men could do. You see, Brother Jerry's gonna come out here in just a minute. He's gonna tell you a parable from this story, and I think you'll enjoy it too. And he said he kind of got a surprise he's going to share with you. He wouldn't tell me. I tried my best. I could tell something was up, but he wouldn't let me know. So maybe I'll find out when y'all do. He'll be here in just a minute, and he'll tell you the secret or the surprise or whatever it is he got, and then he'll give you a Bible story or a Bible lesson out of this, a parable, to go along with the story I just told you. So, all right, I'm gonna be gone. I'll be right back. Well, hey everybody. First thing I'd like to say is I was kind of shocked to see Bubba Batman pull that mask off. Whew. Man, that rascal's ugly. He needs to keep that mask on, don't he? My goodness. I don't know if you noticed it, but did you notice that he had a cut on his nose just like I got on mine? Well, there's a reason for that. You see, after this video, he wanted to shoot my rifle, so I carried him out to the range and let him try it, and you believe he done the same thing I did? Busted that nose. Got blood all over his mask. But anyway, we both healing up and everything going pretty good. But that 45-70, I'm glad that, anyway, I got to put it away and go hunting with a little bit lighter kicking rifle. It'll still do the job. And I may hunt some more with that 45-70. I still like the old gun, even if it does beat me up. But anyway, like Bubba Batman said, I got a surprise for you. I got a little something I want to share to you. First of all, I want to say I'm nearly 67 years old. And I've hunted well over 50 years of that for deer. And I've killed, I don't know how many, hundreds of deer. And a lot of bucks of all sizes, as you can see and saw the videos that I've got around. And you ain't seen nothing yet compared to what's in the rest of the house, what have you. But not bragging, I'm just saying that the Lord's blessed me and I've enjoyed my hunting and all, but I have never been able to kill anything above a 9 point. I don't know why that is. But I have killed a ton of 8 points, 7 points, 6 points, and a ton of 9 points. And my biggest buck on the wall to this day is a big 9 point that I killed with Paul's rifle. And that's another story, another video. But anyway, something happened just yesterday. Yesterday was the first day of our regular rifle season for deer. And up on the hunting club that I hunt, had put a new shooting house, and I decided I was going to try to break it in and hunt it. And I went yesterday afternoon. Me and my brother were kind of lazy and didn't even make a morning hunt. We decided we'd go in and get in our stands around 1 o'clock or so and hunt till dark. But I got in there and I was hunting with this gun. Now this was my daddy's rifle at one time, and I inherited it when my daddy died. It didn't look nothing like this when I inherited it. It wasn't even this caliber. It was a 243, and he killed a truckload of deer with it in 243. But when I inherited it, I just personally didn't care a whole lot for that caliber. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I just personally didn't want it. I wanted something with a little more punch to it. But anyway, I had it rebarreled in 7mm .08 Remington. Had a shilling barrel put on it. But I even through all of that, the stock was still original and shiny. He bought this gun in the early 80s. It's not that new a rifle, actually. But then when a few years ago, when the 6.5 Creedmoor began to be very popular, I decided, well, I didn't want at the time to go out and buy a whole new rifle, so I carried it back over and ended up, I spent more doing this than I would have if I just went and bought another gun. But I carried it over to a gun shop over in a county or two over, and that has done a whole lot of work for me, and had to make customize it for me. And I had to put a shilling 6.5 Creedmoor barrel on it, and had it dipped with a camouflage on the stock. I just don't like hunting with a shiny gun myself. And then I changed scopes on it and this is a 3.5 by 10 by 50 Zeiss Conquest. They don't make this particular scope anymore with the DNZ scope and rings. And anyway, just changed it up. But this is my daddy gun. I was hunting with this rifle yesterday. And at 3:47 in the evening, I looked down in that holler, and there was a big-bodied deer walking through. And I got my binoculars and looked at it. And I'd had him on camera earlier, but I never dreamed he showed up. But I shot him and got him, and it was a 14 point. Did you hear me? A 14 point. And Brother Jerry was a happy camper. But I shot him, and he ran just about 30, 40 steps and piled up. And anyway, I'm tickled. I finally broke the record, the 9-point stall there, and got something more than that. Never dreamed I'd kill a 14 point. But anyway, all right, back to what I'm supposed to be doing. That is telling a lesson about Paul here. And we looked at this story, what he said about Mr. Clarence. I want to take note of the statement that Mr. Clarence made that convinced Paul he needed to go hunting. He said, let's go show these boys what two old men can do. And, you know, the sad thing about it is in our world and in our society, when people age and get older, it seems like it's the tendency to just kind of sweep them to the side, to the curve, or that they don't really contribute anymore, and just kind of not important anymore. People don't listen to them and take any credit for what they say, or listen to what they say, or any advice they've got to give. And I don't know. Now that I'm in that group, I understand how people view that, but I also realize what the Bible has to say about aging and things of that nature, and what the Bible says about the elderly. And I want us just in the few minutes we've got left to take note of that and to draw a lesson from it. First of all, I'd like for us to notice what the Apostle Paul happened to say in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16. He said these words. He said, therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. You see, as we grow older, if we're children of God and we're trying to live the life for Him and have a history of through our youth and then our older years, as we grow older rather, living for Him, there are benefits to that because we mature spiritually in Christ and we become even more valuable or useful. Even the leaders in the Lord's church, as He established it nearly 2,000 years ago, when the church was established on the day of Pentecost in Jerusalem, as it began to grow and saw the need for leadership, while the very leaders in the Lord's church were called elders. That means older. And they had to have lived. There were certain credentials and qualifications the Apostle Paul listed for Timothy and Titus when he wrote letters to those two young men who he challenged and charged to appoint elders in every church. He said these men are to meet these certain qualifications, and those qualifications demanded age and experience and maturity to be able to lead the church of God. Now, those that we find in scriptures that seem to be a detriment spiritually seem to be more so those that were younger, and the attitudes of those of more youthful age. Well, even as it's inferred in the story in John chapter 8 about the woman caught in the very act of adultery, when the Pharisees and the scribes brought that woman out of the very act and interrupted Jesus teaching a Bible lesson to His disciples and all the people gathered together. When He charged them, He said, "Let him that is without sin cast the first stone." And He bent back over and started scribbling on the ground, trying to ignore them. The Bible says they departed. And it starts from the oldest. It started with the older ones to the younger ones. The younger ones were the last ones to leave. They were the ones who wanted to be the most argumentative, but the older ones saw the lesson immediately and it had to admit humbly that, yes, we're sinners too. We can't pick up a stone and throw it at this woman. But on and on we could go with this, but the Bible also tells us that basically as long as we live our lives on earth, we've got a place in His kingdom and a usefulness and a value. I've noticed just from observation that people that are aged seem to be the most beautiful people as far as their attitudes and dispositions in general. Now, I've met some older people that were kind of ill and ornery, and just like the movie came out several years ago, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, I think it was, called Grumpy Old Men. I've seen some grumpy old men. But in the general tenor of things, I look at age just like the seasons of the year. As the year begins and the spring comes, and then there's summer, and before fall, when the leaves die and turn brown and wither and fall to the ground, it's in the fall, in those latter parts of the season of their lives, that they turn the most beautiful colors. And the weather's cooler and calmer and more pleasant. And the fall is my favorite time of the year because nature is showing its greatest beauty. And I think that's true in the human lives as well, that those that are older I've seen people who in their youth were harsh and critical and judgmental and sometimes even cruel and hateful. But with age, just like they say, wine gets better with age, well, people do too. And those that are older seem to be sweeter and kinder and more forgiving and compassionate and gracious and just people you enjoy to be around. I've always personally, even in my youth, loved to be around elderly people. Maybe it's because my grandparents, Pa and Ma there in the picture, raised me, my dad's parents. But I've always loved that because they have so much to offer. that you learn so much. They've got so much wisdom. They can tell stories of experiences that you don't read about in the history books. On and on it goes. But the challenge of spiritual growth and with aging and responsibility is reflected in the words of the Hebrew writer in chapter 4, verses 9 through 11. I'd like to read these words to you. The writer says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disbelief." This lesson from the Hebrew writer has to do with the generation of God's people who had escaped Egypt by the leadership of Moses, but who, through his leadership, were carried right to the brink of the promised land. Moses wasn't allowed to go over, but Joshua and Caleb was going to carry them into that land of milk and honey. But they stopped in disbelief. They stopped short of the place where they could rest and be blessed and be benefited at the end of their journey. But the lesson of the Hebrew writer is that like when God did the creation, there were 6 days that he labored, and then the last day was a Sabbath rest. The word Sabbath means rest. And he says we don't stop working, we don't stop doing the job till the end comes. And as the lesson would apply to all of us, we're useful to God and in his kingdom all of our lives. From the times we are old enough to understand the message of the gospel and the plan of salvation and accept Christ as our Savior, and as we grow and mature and age spiritually and are renewed more and more, we keep maturing, we keep serving, we keep doing his will until we take our last breath. And those of us that are aged are valuable in God's kingdom and valuable in life. And I would challenge you, as the common phrase or cliche is, respect your elders. Give respect and to those who have lived a life and have experienced things that we haven't seen yet or gone through, because they have much to contribute and much to say. And usually they'll do it in a spirit of loving humility and tenderness, and in a way that we will receive it if we'll just listen and take heed to what they say. Well, anyway, that's our spiritual lesson for the day, and I hope that there's something there that will be beneficial to you. We've got many other stories about Paul's rifle. The next one that I plan to line up to tell you is the story of when Paul gave me that rifle. And it happened 10 years late after the story you heard today in 1987. So so far the stories are coming in 10-year increments. But 20 years after he received that rifle, the John Bell Williams rifle, is when I received it. He added 20 years. And now I have had it since 1987 as my own, and I'll tell you how all that came to be. But until next time we come along and look at the stories and the lessons involved, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to subscribe and to share us with others, to give us all the likes you possibly can, and just hope this channel will be a blessing to you. It continues to grow, and we're excited about this, as we've said in other videos, but it is growing, and I hope it's being beneficial. But my prayer is, and certainly of Bubba Batman as well, is that you will have a good day, and that you will share this channel with others, so that hopefully it'll make their day a little bit better as well. But until next time, this is Brother Jerry on behalf of Bubba Batman, And we bid you a very blessed day.